Good evening, everyone. It is 6:31 and I'll declare that the Agenda Briefing Forum is now open. I'd like to invite Councillor Daniel Minson to read the Acknowledgement of Country, please.
Thank you. I am honoured to be standing on Whadjuk Noongar country on the banks of the Swan River. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, which continues to be important today. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Item number 4 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. 4.1, the purpose of the Agenda Briefing Forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft Ordinary Council meeting agenda. Tonight is not a decision-making forum, nor is there opening for debate. Members of the public that may be affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matters being formally considered by Council at the next Ordinary Council meeting. And I just will say for the record, the matters in tonight's agenda include items that will go to the next Ordinary Council meeting on the 21st of July, but there are also some items on tonight's Agenda Briefing Forum's agenda that will be going through to a special council meeting next Tuesday, the 14th of July, and they include the advocacy priorities and the adoption of the annual budget. 4.2 is notice of recording and live streaming. All participation in this Agenda Briefing Forum will be audio and visually recorded, and it is being live streamed now on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available as a recording on the town's website after the meeting. 4.3 is conduct of this meeting. All those who are in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the town staff or any individual elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at this meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent, by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of staff. Questions and statements are to be directed to myself as the presiding member, and I may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with any responses. 4.4 is public participation time. There is an opportunity to ask questions and to make statements both at the beginning and the end of this Agenda Briefing Forum. However, the opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the briefing forum is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time, which occurs at the start of the meeting. Public participation time will be held for a maximum of 30 minutes. Any additional time must be by agreement from the elected members present at the meeting, and it will be approved in 5-minute increments. As per our usual practice, or rather my usual practice as the presiding member, is there's a limit of 3 questions per person and 2 minutes allocated to the making of statements. However, if there are very few people present in the public gallery, we can be more generous with those restrictions. They're intended so that everyone present gets a fair and equal opportunity to ask their questions and make their statements. 4.5 relates to what happens if a question is taken on notice. So responses to any questions tonight that are taken on notice by the town staff that relate to the agenda items will appear presented in the officer's report for the Ordinary Council meeting agenda, and it will be found under the heading Further Consideration, which appears at the very end of the relevant officer report. Item 5 on the agenda relates to attendance. We have all elected members in attendance, save for Councillor Gordon Manley, who is a late apology. There are a number of staff of the town of Victoria Park, both executive, management and officers, who are present, led by the CEO, Mr. Askew. We have no elected members on approved leave of absence. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Mr. CEO, do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I've received one. Item 14.3, yourself, Mayor Vernon, an impartiality interest. I own a property located on one of the proposed road renewal projects in the Capital Works program.
We have 2 other declarations of interest. I think perhaps the update not given to you, Mr. CEO, but I'll let you read them out.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Item 12.1, Councillor Biondi, an impartiality interest. I wish to declare an impartiality interest in relation to item 12.1. The nature of my interest is that some of the consultants engaged in the preparation of the structure plan are people and/or organisations that I engage with or work with from time to time in my professional capacity within the town planning industry. I do not consider this interest to affect my ability to consider the item impartially in the public interest. And also item 14.3, Councillor Anderson, also impartiality. I'd like to declare an impartiality interest. I own property located on one of the proposed road renewal projects in the Capital Works program.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Are there any other elected members who have an interest that they need to declare? No? All right, thank you for that. On that basis, just a gentle reminder, if as we progress through, including as questions start coming through, if you consider that you do have an interest that needs to be declared under the rules, please make sure that you notify me of that in the meeting so we can get that declaration recorded. We'll move on to item 7, which is public participation time, which I'll now open at 6:37 p.m. One person is listed on the pre-list, so I'll go to that person first, and then I'll ask, generally speaking, if there's anyone else in the public gallery who has any questions or they wish to avail of public participation time through the making of statements. When I call your name, you come forward and you only need to state your suburb, as is required by our meeting rules. So first on the list, Luana Lissandro.
Lathlane. My questions relate to a number of items. One is 12.2, the advocacy. I'm wanting to know, and it's also blurs with the budget agenda as well, I'm wanting to know what is the shortfall in funding for the Kent Street sandpit. Bearing in mind that I believe the federal government have announced that they're going to fund 500,000, and then the town, I think in the budget papers, had 167 from memory. So I'm just wanting to know what the shortfall of the total funding is for that project.
All right, I'm going to refer that question to the Chief Operations Officer, Ms. Lebickas.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Currently, we have a high-level concept design for the sandpit. We're moving forward with some of the planting, but in terms of the total cost, we won't know that cost until detailed design. So we haven't got that finalised number of what the gap is. We do know that it will be more than is currently in the budget, simply because of the extent of their unconsolidated fill and the work that we have to do to get that site ready to accept paths and other things.
Just a follow-on question. When is it likely that the detailed design will be completed with those costings? When is the town estimating when that will occur?
Ms. Lebickas.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. We have a concept forum planned for August to contemplate whether or not there is there's the feasibility around putting a building on that site as part of either a building or some kind of welcome centre. And so once we know that, we'll get on with the adjusting the concept design, and that will allow us to go to detailed design. So I'm hopeful that we'll start detailed design at this side of Christmas.
I think it's also worthwhile noting that in relation to this project, you might have seen this about our advocacy priorities in the past. We presented through an advocacy priority project brochure when we were lobbying state and federal government members for support for this ahead of the 2025 state and federal elections, that an indicative project cost of $1.6 million was identified. That spanned across more than one aspect of the project. So obviously one aspect of the project is weeding, one aspect of the project is planting, another aspect of the project is accessible pathways, another aspect of the project is the construction of a car park and a viewing platform at the Jarrah Road, Kent Street entry. So different aspects of the project, they have different levels of interplay between each other. We were able to get a funding commitment from one candidate running for election. Subsequent to the election, however, we were contacted by the Federal Department of the Environment and Climate, who proposed to us a grant funding stream that would allow $500,000 for this project, provided we submitted a compliant project proposal, which we did do, and that is how we ended up getting $500,000 allocated to us towards this project. In terms of it, though, I think from what elected members have been told in the past, is that clearly it was important to do the weeding and removal of the noxious weeds in the sandpit site before other types of work took place. And then indeed the weeding might take more than one season to complete, and I think that is true. And certainly the intention was that the accessible pathways, there would be a desire to create those before we would do large-scale planting. So we'd be able to do some planting where there's no plan for accessible pathways, but the accessible pathways themselves, those, the car park and the viewing platform would all have to integrate. And they're the hard infrastructure, completely separate to the green infrastructure. So the project is intended that it'll be a multi-year project. I'm not sure if that helps any further, but part of that is explained in the advocacy priorities that we outlined in previous financial years. So we want to maintain that project on our books as an advocacy priority because it has yet to attract, other than the $500,000, perhaps a dedicated environmental grant through, say, Lotteries West. So we still have hope that aspects of the project will be suitable in the future for other forms of grant funding.
I have a follow-on question from the officer's response in relation to a structure being built. Does Deepwater have fire breaks for buildings if they're built within a bushland setting? And what is the minimum meterage that has to be cleared of potential bushland if a building were to be inserted into the Kent Street sandpit or anywhere on the Jerderup bushlands?
Ms. Labicus?
I'd need to take the clearing question on notice because I guess it depends on the location and whether or not you where it is, where a building is in relation to hard paths and that sort of stuff. So I need to work that through. Sorry, the rest of your question, can you repeat that?
It was just in relation to, is there a set, 10-metre clearance fire breaks, basically, from a building? So if it's in a bushland setting, which it is,
yeah.
Sure, I'd assume that there is requirements in relation to having fire breaks, and that means you have to have a clearance between the building and bushland.
Yes, so sometimes the paths actually make up part of that fire break. It depends on the type of building that you put there. It depends on the occupancy. There's a lot of depends as you work through those. But I'll take that on notice.
We'll take that on notice.
I do have other questions, but I'm not sure if...
I might just inquire of the other people in the gallery. Were you wanting to ask some questions tonight and make statements? Because depending on what it is, I'm prepared to allow Ms. Lysandro to ask some more questions, but we've got plenty of time to come to you.
Sure, not for item 7, potentially at the end, maybe 1 or 2, but not for now.
All right, that's fine. All right, you can carry on, Ms. Lysandro.
Just in relation to a question for 12.1, the potential plan, I assume, allows for data centres that could be built within Technology Park. Is there any provision basically looking at fire risk, given that data centres sometimes have to have diesel storage of fuel as backup for power.
Direct that question to the Chief Community Planner, Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question. There is the potential for data centres in Bentley Technology Park, but only it's only likely in terms of the way that the structure plan is set up, but also our local planning scheme as an ancillary part of another use. So as a supporting part of a research and development function, not as a standalone data centre that you might be thinking of, like the next gen data centres.
Yep.
So that is, in my view, with the structure plan and the way that our local planning scheme number 2 is set up, that's not capable of being supported within Bentley Tech Park. If a data centre was ancillary to another use, so it was formed a part of a primary use, provisions that might protect that development from fire and so on would need to be, first of all, the development would need to be compliant with national construction codes, so it would go through a building permit, but as part of that process, there may need to be an assessment from a fire engineer, which is something that we get from time to time as well, and so that would be captured through a development approval process. Yep.
And would any data centre be drawing on groundwater?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vannon. I actually don't know the answer to that question, so I'd need to take that on notice. I don't think that it would be, but I will take that on notice.
We can take that on notice. Mr. Doy, is that a question you will be able to answer, or does it entirely depend on what type of development application might be put forward for a data centre? Because I'm not sure if you're going to be answering a rhetorical question that you don't really know the answer to, or one that you actually can say there are rules around.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. If I'm answering it, it will obviously not be specific
General.
Because nothing has been
Understand.
provided. It would be general in nature and would probably be heavily disclaimed.
All right, so we take it on notice, noting that it'll have to be a very general answer in that regard.
Thank you. I just want to make a statement. Just in relation to the advocacy, I support the town's work towards getting the Kent Street sandpit as part of the advocacy program, as well as the Rutland Avenue shared pathway, which I know a lot of residents are hoping eventually will be completed. In relation to the Kent Street sandpit, I know that it will take a little while for the project to get put forward and to iron out some of the technical aspects of it because of the fact that it is a contaminated site. But I would really urge the council to think of trying to get this project moving forward, given that Perth will celebrate 200 years of the Swan Colony, and it will be a time that for our First Nations people it will be a painful experience for them, given that the project has a cultural element and it also has song lines. And I did see in the minutes for the Mindera group that they talked about linkages from Curtin Technology Park, and they were talking about yarning circles, and then obviously having the Kent Street sandpit having yarning circles, that this could be a project that could be part of a healing process, because when I put forward the motion to include Curtin University and the Mindera group and cultural aspects of the project, I did see it as healing country, given that we're going to have an anniversary in 2029. So I really would like to see the council pushing hard on this to get those funds and to move it forward and to have it as an exemplary project, which I did see that the federal member did make mention a while back, saying that she was quite excited about the project having the cultural aspects to the site. In terms of having a building on the structure, that should be a separate project in itself. If it is to be built, it's probably better that it's built on Harold Rossiter as opposed to actually on the sandpit, because I think there's too many challenges given the fact of its history, that site, and also in terms of any potential fire breaks that could wipe out further bushland if you have to have 10 metres from a building or whatever. You could be effectively wiping out a third of that sandpit site for vegetation. So I think I'd like to see the town move and get this project underway. And I'm sure that a lot of our residents would love to see that as integrated. I'm not opposed to having an education centre, but I don't think it should be on the Kent Street sandpit or the Jodarup bushlands. I think it should be adjacent to, and there is a section of Harold Rossiter that could be accommodated for that. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anyone else who wishes to ask any questions or make any statements at this time? No? All right, thank you. Well, we will close public participation time for this first session at 6:52 p.m. Item 8 on the agenda is presentations. There are none tonight. Item 9, deputations. None are registered. Item 10, method of dealing with agenda business. So I'm going to list the items off the agenda for which we've had questions. Those will end up being the items that we discuss tonight. When you hear me call out the items, if you have already received answers to your questions and you don't wish to pursue those questions tonight, please let me know, because we may be able to remove that off the list. And equally, if there is an agenda item that you want to ask questions about that's not included in this list, please let me know at the end. So firstly, we have item 11.1, Council Resolution Status Report, June 2026. Item 11.2, Advocacy Program. Item 12.1, Bentley Technology Park Precinct Structure Plan Response to Submissions. Item 13.3, Low Cost Road Safety Program Grant. Item 14.1, Financial Statements May 2026. And item 14.3, Adoption of Annual Budget 2026-27. So firstly, are there any items on that list for which people had wanted to ask questions but they no longer wish to? Councillor Minson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so answers have been given to my questions and notice on 11.1 and 14.1, which I'm happy for that to be taken off the list.
All right, thank you. I'll just check. Is there anyone else who had questions that they wanted to ask about 11.1 or 14.1? No, not seeing any indications. So on that basis, we'll take 11.1 off the list and we'll take 14.1 off the list. Thanks, Councillor Minson. Appreciate that heads up. All right, so are there any item numbers that haven't been mentioned that elected members would like to have added to the list? No? All right, that makes it easy. So we're going to start with item 11.2. This is the advocacy program. Councillor Biondi, I understand you have some questions to ask about this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just acknowledging that some of my questions have already been answered, but and forgive me if I've missed something in the response that I've received today. I just wanted to double check with respect to the officer recommendation. So with how it's written, it just lists off the endorsement of the priority, the advocacy priority. And then obviously in the officer report, there is the objective and key actions associated with each advocacy priority. So I just wanted to get clarification on what it is that we're actually, if council were to obviously go with the officer recommendation, what it is that we would be adopting. Is it just the line item of the advocacy priority, or are those other matters that sit behind each advocacy priority more of an operational issue? We're just simply endorsing each item, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Councillor Biondi. I'm going to direct that question to the Manager of Stakeholder Relations, Mr Dunlop.
Thank you, Councillor Biondi, and through you, Mayor Vernon. The recommendation is to adopt the advocacy priorities as items, but I guess the suggested actions or the key objectives are just illustrative only and meant to indicate the type of activity that would take place rather than be a prescribed definite approach. So obviously within each priority there'd be different actions and plans that form, I guess, the bulk of the advocacy intent, and these would be developed according to what's best for each plan. The mention of those in the report is really to illustrate the type of activity that might take place.
Councillor Biondi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a follow-up question. Thank you. That was a very robust answer. Would it be fair to say then that that objective or those key activities could change as time goes on if we weren't adopting those aspects of each advocacy priority?
Mr. Dunlop.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's true. It could change.
Are there any other questions on the advocacy priority program? No? All right. Item 12.1, Bentley Technology Park Precinct Structure Plan, response to submissions. Some questions for this. Councillor Cruiser.
Thank you. In the case that there was a data centre that was an auxiliary use for another approved use, would that be expected to come to council or would that be determined by planning staff?
Refer that question to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. If the town was to receive a development application for a research and development proposal, and there was a data centre that was ancillary to that, so a large server room or supercomputer, which I know there is one out at Bentley Tech Park at the moment, that would be assessed and determined by town staff under delegation.
Councillor Cruiser.
I think I'm content with the other answers I've received by email. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Minson, got some questions about this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've sent quite a few questions through and there's some big answers. I won't read them all out, but I do have some follow-up on some of the questions, but I might have to just give a little bit of context on the questions I asked via email, just in way of asking the next question. But concerning the risk of losing the mature trees in that area and I guess the impacts to the black cockatoo habitat out there. The question, or the proposed condition or change to the conditions that the town's recommending along Kent Street. There's those skinny parcels of land owned by Development WA that are currently proposed to be developed with quite limited, setback requirements. And the town's proposing to that they either be public open space or they have landscape length setbacks. That landscape, the proposal for it to be a landscape setback, is that, are we proposing that the PSP require it to be a landscape setback all the way around the lot on all four sides or on just one side of the skinny lot?
Refer that to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Minson. We're proposing it to be a landscape frontage around the entirety of the skinny lot, which may, and this will be up to assessment and analysis from the Department of Planning and Development WA, but could quite likely render development unfeasible on those skinny lots, which is why the second part of our commentary then says if that is the case, then just consider converting it to public open space.
Yeah, thank you. A question about the plot ratios. So we don't have a limit or a requirement for plot ratio, and the only thing limiting development, my understanding, is the setbacks on the boundary lots. So is there no, I'm not sure the right planning word, but the minimum open space on a lot required that I can understand when we have a single house, I can't remember, 40% needs to be open space or something like that. Is there any requirement for a minimum open space percentage on any of these lots?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks, Councillor Minson. That's a good question. So yes, so the development provisions from memory in the structure plan, there's many, but the primary ones as it relates to the scope of the building or the building envelope is, you're quite right, is setbacks but also height. There will be instances where if residential development is considered, then there is likely to be open space, private open space provisions under the R codes. But as per public open space provision within actual sites, and I may just take this on notice just to double check, but my understanding is that there isn't a requirement within particular sites as development occurs, but actually catered for in the allocated public open space provision as shown on the plans. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess following up, because I guess my concern is that there's some lots on the site that have a significant amount of mature trees like dispersed across the lot, and it's in the middle of the lot and things like that. And the proposal is that we don't have a limit on, I guess, where you can't build over the lot other than the edges. That if we're saying the only protection we have is our local planning policy, 47, or is it 47? Yeah, that for protection of trees. If someone does propose, a building that's, takes up the whole lot and gives the open space requirement as like a podium or something like that on it, is there actually any mechanism for us to say, no, you have to build around the trees as the conditions currently stand?
Mr. Doy?
So in that instance, at the moment, we would lean heavily on the objectives within the precinct structure plan, especially under, I can't remember the name of the section, but under urban ecology, there's a series of objectives, which from memory, we've requested a modification to even strengthen those objectives. And that's what we would be relying on, along with the development provisions we mentioned before and LPP 4047. And maybe there's other things that I can't bring to mind right now, through the process of development assessment and our design review panel as well. So they are mechanisms, obviously, that allow for negotiation and refinement in design, which are proven. Now that's in the instance though that it does come through the town, and so some of these developments may choose other pathways, of which the town still has an involvement with assessment and negotiation, but would take the design review panel of the town out of the process. But that's what we'd be relying on at the moment.
Thank you. I guess so. Acknowledging that we've got some controls around the objectives, which sometimes be they're not, I guess, clear cut. That there's a bit of negotiation, as you say, and some of these proposals are significant might go through development assessment panels and significant development assessment unit, things like that. Does the town have, I guess, a proposal that the council could consider of a condition that we could require that's a bit more, I guess, robust and a bit clearer about what are some minimum requirements of protecting mature trees across development lots here? Something that's without plot ratios, or something that says that you can't develop the whole site, or you have to leave a percentage of open space. I don't know what all the different mechanisms are, but is there anything open to us to consider for something a bit more robust?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I think that's one that I'll take on notice and provide in the further consideration as part of the report. Thanks.
We'll take that on notice. Anything further, Councillor Minson?
Just one two further ones, sorry. The question on the trigger point for when the town will receive the proposed public open spaces, it talks about when the the site is developed or subdivided. So when we're talking the public open space along Jarrah Road, which is the significant one, that's, it's already there, but it's a Development WA site that's proposed to be public open space. So when is the trigger that will become public open space? Is it are we saying it's the development of that site or an adjacent site?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. My understanding with that particular site is a requirement for Development WA to develop the public open space to a standard that's identified within the precinct structure plan, and then that must happen before it can be handed as is intended in the precinct structure plan to the town as public open space. So they would have to create the public open space to a standard they've identified in the precinct structure plan. The only public open space that's identified in the precinct structure plan that wouldn't be like that is Connection 6, which is relying on moments of subdivision, and the town in its proposed modifications would like to test and probably take a position that Development WA should seek acquisition rather than subdivision for Connection 6 as the moment where public open space becomes available.
Thank you. So just on the Jarrah Road public open space, so is there a timing requirement, I guess, connected with the broader area? So is it open, I guess, that the other lots, which are, some of them privately owned and some of them curtain, that they start to be developed, but unless Development WA has any plan to actually do the requirements on the public open space and hand it over to us, that's not actually tied. So are you saying we could see the other lots all develop and nothing happen with the public open space until they decide to get around to it?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. That's a great question, Councillor Minson. I am going to take that on notice and just make sure that I provide the proper answer for that one. Yep.
We'll take that on notice.
And just one final question, just on Councillor Cruz's questions on the data centre. I'm not an expert on data centres, but I think, a lot, when I read about it, a lot of it, they talk about, we have this data centre and we're like training a model, and it's like, we've got a data centre that's working on making the AI, better, which I guess could quite easily be considered research and development. So if someone came to us and said, we want to build a data centre to train AI models, which is, because they can't, my understanding is that you use the service and it trains itself as you're using it. Is that kind of open then to be considered research and development? I guess quite a specific question.
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. It will come as no surprise to you. I'm also not an expert on data centres as well, and so this is brave new ground. What I would say, though, that the objectives of the precinct structure plan, as I read them, don't talk to humanless data centres, and so we would be looking for uses that include people and businesses rather than just plant equipment. But in saying that, this is new territory as well. But my answer to Councillor Cruiser from before stands. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Anyone else have any questions about this matter? Yep, Councillor Biondi.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is the most exciting item on the list. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, and not to labour the data centre point, but what is the actual land use classification for a data centre proposal?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. We are treating it as a use not listed.
Thank you. Just in terms of this structure plan assessment process, noting that it also sits over land with our neighbours at the City of South Perth, am I able just to get an understanding of where they're at with their assessment of their side of the structure plan and how that's working in with the town's assessment?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. The first part of that question I'll take on notice in terms of the timing. I'm actually not sure, and I'd be guessing. However, I do know that they are supportive of the precinct structure plan and have been working with Development WA with the town through the process. As to the detail of that support within their proposed modifications, I'm not certain, and so I'm happy to take that on notice. And if there is detail in terms of their proposed modifications that I can link to in the further considerations part of the report, happy to do so. Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Anything further?
Yeah, just a few more questions, Mayor Vernon. Just picking up on, I had some questions around the POS as well, noting that Councillor Minson raised some questions. So obviously they would, if I'm correct, they would become town assets once they're transferred free of cost. Do we have any idea, and obviously noting we are in the structure planning stage, what the ongoing costs or maintenance of those assets would be? And just sort of linking in with that question, is it envisaged that a developer contribution plan is necessary or needed for this structure plan?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Biondi. No, to a development contribution plan, that's not envisaged or felt like that it is needed. In terms of maintenance costs, as Development WA works through the process of taking what are high-level concepts within the precinct structure plan into something more real, they will need to liaise with the town to understand our requirements, specifications, those types of things, and it'll be then that we discuss ongoing considerations on ongoing maintenance. Yep.
Thank you. One more question, if I can, Mayor Vernon. Do we have any sort of ballpark figure in terms of how much we would receive in additional rates in terms of the redevelopment of this area?
Mr. Doy, got your magic calculator with you tonight?
Duncan's staring at me, CFO staring at me across the thing. He's taking notes. Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Biondi. No, I don't know. So in calculating rates, we would have to, there may be information within the precinct structure plan or its appendices around ultimate yield in terms of dwellings and floor area, which then could be extrapolated into future rates. But then I guess the other variables are rate of growth and whether it's taken up to the full extent that the precinct structure plan would allow, which virtually never happens. So it would be a real guess. So the answer is I don't have a figure, no.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about this item? I'm going to go to Councillor Melrosa first, then I'll go to Councillor Ingram and then back to Councillor Cruiser.
It's been so long that I forgot which button to push. That's a great question from Councillor Biondi, and I feel like I would like to know the answer to that, and I don't mind that it would be a guess. I think that if a private sector was to do this, they would know the answer. So I think if we had a range of, I guess, scenarios, that would be really, really handy. Yeah.
Mr. Doy, it felt like that was a bit of a statement, Councillor Melrosa, which we don't do at ABF, but Councillor Doy, if we turned that into a statement, the question it would be, is that something the town can consider presenting, or is that not really feasible?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Well, it won't come from my magic calculator, but but it is something I can take on notice, and and it is a fair point. I'm happy to speak to Development WA to see whether they can support the town and provide some information at OCM. Yep.
Do I take it from that, Mr. Doy, that it's possible for the town to work out what might be the maximum number of lots within the precinct that could be developed as, say, residential versus commercial, because obviously they attract different rates, and bearing in mind there is a level of development out there at the moment, albeit none of it residential. So it could look at what's the maximum number of lots that could be chopped up in accordance with the zoning, and thereafter work out if, say, there was to be a potential scenario based on what would happen if it was a 25-75% split between residential and commercial, 50-50 split between residential, commercial, and then if it became more residential and less commercial. Is that a method that could be used to try and identify some very, very, you'd call them very conservative estimates? I was going to say loose estimates, but very conservative estimates of where you might go, assuming a lot of pieces of the puzzle lined up to actually prompt a particular type of development to go in there that may never go in there. Mr. Doy?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Vernon. So growth, you were talking about growth scenarios. Yes, growth scenarios is something that we've done before. We've provided with the Albany Highway Precinct Structure Plan, you may remember. It's just taking the growth scenario and then extrapolating that into a rates figure. And so happy to take that on notice and speak to the team about the possibility of doing that. Yep.
All right. Anything further, Councillor Melrosa? No. Councillor Ingram?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. So the question I wanted to ask, actually, funnily enough, you've preempted a little bit. I was actually going to ask in regards to page 115, the economic growth potential long-term projections in the in attachment 12.1.01. Is there a particular methodology as to how those three growth scenarios are worked out with regards to conservative, moderate and high growth when regarding employment figures? Because there's a pretty big gulf there, and I just want to make sure that I understand the background context, if you have that available. Thanks.
And go to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon, and thanks, Councillor Ingram. You've pointed me to half of the task that Councillor Morosa mentioned before, which just has to do with floor space, not dwelling yield. In terms of the methodology for how that was developed, I would need to take that on notice and find that out. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And also, just quickly regarding the question I think earlier raised and answered regarding, I think it was Councillor Croz's questions regarding the data centres. You made reference that the town officers would make the determination of a data centre application on its merits. I'm just curious if there's a sort of matrix for how that decision making may take place that's worth presenting to us as part of the further considerations, just for our background information, to make sure that certain concerns might be considered or not, if that's something that's possible.
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Ingram. There's not a matrix, so with any application that's received, we assess it against the planning framework in all of its glorious complexity. That's the job of the planner. Yep. So it'll be, in this instance, it will be local planning scheme number 2, the precinct structure plan, and then any relevant local planning policies.
Okay, thank you for that. So I suppose in regards to that, and I think reference to the answers that you gave Councillor Biondi, you mentioned that it's assessed as an additional not declared use, I think. Was that correct?
Use not listed.
Use not listed, that's the term I'm looking for. Where might I find what concerns or considerations that can evaluated for a use not listed?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Councillor Ingram, you can go to clause 18, subclause 4 in the local planning scheme number 2. Yep. And also, while you're in local planning scheme number 2, you might as well turn to Schedule D, which relates to special use zones and technology park as well, because you'll need to read that at the same time to make sense of it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Ingram. Councillor Cruiser, you had another question or some questions?
Yes. I'd like to hear an explanation of how the proposed modifications would address community concerns about the failure of the precinct plan to align with our urban forest strategy and to protect black cockatoo habitat.
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks, Councillor Crozer, for the question. From the town's perspective, the precinct structure plan is trying to strike a balance between the preservation of the landscape, and of which obviously includes a lot of mature trees and trees that are specific for cockatoo habitat and for cockatoo feeding. It's striking a balance between that and the ability to be able to deliver change to a business park or innovation precinct, which has languished for a long period of time. So it is trying to strike that balance. In trying to strike that balance, it's not going to be perfect for everybody. And so it is certainly allowing a significantly more development than it has previously. There is no question about it. But it is the town's perspective that it struck it is administration's perspective that it struck the right balance. Notwithstanding, we have recommended some minor modifications to try and strengthen objectives within the urban ecology section within the PSP. Yep.
Thank you. I think what I was actually asking is, could you explain to us how those minor modifications will help to support the urban forest strategy and habitat for black cockatoos?
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. There are two modifications that we're recommending. There is one modification and one recommendation that we have included within the report. One is to strengthen the objectives of the urban ecology section, which will be used in assessment, as I spoke about with Councillor Minson before. So there is some wording in one of the objectives, which is, from our perspective, we deemed was a bit weak, and we have taken some words out to try and strengthen the importance of retaining mature trees on site, and then that will help us in assessment, in our assessment. So that's the first thing that we're recommending. The second thing that we're recommending is that and that we will include, subject to council approval, in our letter to the department when we provide the decision of council and the modifications, is that the proposal be assessed under the, and I need to get my terminology right, if you just bear with me for a moment. That the precinct structure plan is referred to DPCA and an assessment is undertaken on the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, so that it actually goes through that proper assessment against the Act. That is a recommendation that we're making.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about this item? I've got a few questions. So the first one is in relation to the data centre being treated as a use not listed. Is that the town's view under the local planning scheme only if it were to be a standalone development described as a data centre, or would that same use not listed categorisation apply if it was a data centre that was ancillary to an otherwise, call it an R&D for want of a better word, outfit, which I think is something you spoke about separately. So I'm not quite sure, does it only get the use not listed if it's standalone, or would it have the use that belonged to the primary or major development if it were ancillary to another type of business. Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. You've answered your question correctly. So we would treat we always consider what's the primary use, and so if the primary use and the assessment would be undertaken against that primary use. So if the primary use was for a research and development, so say like a CSIRO or something like that, and then there was a section of the proposed development that included what could be considered as a data centre, so a room full of servers and so on, we would treat that as ancillary to the primary use. We would assess it under the primary use. Yeah.
So to clarify, would that make any difference if there were a data centre component that was actually bigger than the primary use in terms of footprint, scale, likely operations? Would that change it at all, Mr. Doy?
Yes, it would. So if we had a proposal which was, I'm just making this up, 80% data centre, and then had a shop on the side, or a hole in the wall cafe, we would be treating that as a data centre. Yeah.
Yeah, not to rain on your parade of your example, but that kind of example probably wasn't what I was thinking. But I was thinking more something that would be deeply based in research and development around probably anything from, say, medical research, biosecurity research, and the component of it that is human-led and required space would be well outweighed by the size of a data centre that would actually be running the diagnostics, as Councillor Minson pointed out, testing and growing the AI, such that was a significant portion of the physical structure. Would that make a difference, or would that not? Because that would still simply be considered as ancillary to the primary R&D that was maybe, say, biosecurity related, DNA related, that sort of thing, medical research.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. These are tricky questions because we haven't faced these types of applications before. I guess in that instance, we would be considering each application on its merits and seeking as much information from the applicant as we could to understand what the use is, what it's doing, and whether it fits with the objectives of the technology part.
All right, thank you. My next question is one that I've struggled with sometimes with planning matters. A note throughout the documents, including in the schedule of modifications, there seems to be an interchangeability, whether it's by drafter's design or drafter's omission, to talk about associated with and ancillary to. So I call them one versus the other. Which is the correct planning classification? Is it that it is associated with or ancillary to? Are they in fact different? Is there scope for both of them to be in there? I'm trying to work it out. Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I can take that on notice. Yeah.
I'd be grateful if you could, because I'd like to understand if it means anything, because it might not, but it'd be good to know if it did or it didn't. The next question that I have relates to, I guess, for want of a better word, I would call it effectively what comes next. With regards to the proposed modifications that the town would like council to approve for this, what happens if the WA Planning Commission doesn't like your proposed modifications? Are they able to say they don't accept it with the modifications and rule them out, Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. The answer to that question is yes. Sometimes that can happen. Sometimes the department in their Department of Planning in their assessment may agree with some of the modifications of the town, and others they may not. But yes, there is a scenario where they don't agree with any of the town's recommended modifications, and they proceed. Yep.
follow-up question from that, has the town had any discussions with the department as to whether they think the proposed modifications are likely to be favourable to the departmental officers who will be advising and making recommendations to the WAPC, or will it be necessary for the town to make that case specifically to the WAPC? Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. I'm not aware of any conversations around the specific modifications that we're recommending, and so part of our job following Council's determination will be to talk through the modifications with the department and put our best foot forward.
All right, thank you. It leads to my next question about trying to understand where to from here. So it's said in the officer's report, this precinct structure plan will apply to both the City of South Perth and the town of Victoria Park, but clearly we will each only deal with development applications that come to us for the portion of Tech Park that sits in our local government area. What would happen if the City of South Perth adopted or recommended modifications to the PSP that are contradictory to the objectives of the town of Victoria Park in relation to things like its urban forest strategy and the modifications that the town staff are suggesting? And what would happen thereafter if the City of South Perth's modifications were to gain priority in the eyes of the WAPC over ours, leaving us with a PSP that we need to implement through our town planning scheme, but noting it doesn't achieve any of our desired objectives? Mr. Doy?
Yeah, the Department of Planning will be the ultimate adjudicator. So if the City of South Perth were to put forward modifications of a nature that weren't anywhere near aligned with the town, it's the department that's the adjudicator, so they would make the decision. Notwithstanding, though, that the precinct structure plan has been designed to fit into two schemes. One of those is ours. And so development within the town would need to be assessed under LPS2, the precinct structure plan, but also, where applicable, our local planning policy suite. So that wouldn't be negated.
Thank you. My final question, I think, picks up from Councillor Minson's question. So I'll call it, let's call it the public open space zone, which in the pictures that we see for that part of Tech Park that sits in the town of Victoria Park, is there any scope for the PSP to end up, subject to your advice back to council, that there is some more robust mechanism that we could use for the protection of mature trees within, I'll call it that small narrow corridor that runs along Jarrah Road? Is there the capacity for the PSP to have different provisions in relation to how that public open space would be treated with regards to tree retention than it may have for public open space in the City of South Perth's part of the PSP? Or is the government's desire that the PSP will only have one universal approach to things like public open space, such that they wouldn't be prepared to allow there to be, I guess, two separate concepts sitting within the one PSP? Mr. Doy?
Mayor Vernon, I might just ask a clarifying question. Are you talking about a particular public open space area within the PSP, or are you talking about provisions across the entire PSP related to retention of mature trees?
Well, what I'm thinking of is when I looked at the diagrams and the plans from above, there's a clear boundary of green space that runs along Jarrah Road within the town, which is not featured in the City of South Perth's portion of Tech Park. And so I guess my question is, if we were to get to the stage where we consider there's something stronger that should be done for the protection of that space with the trees in it, is it at all possible that a PSP that the government wants to apply equally to both parts of Tech Park could actually have a different, potentially stronger provision on our side than it does on the City of South Perth side? Or is that simply not possible, Mr. Doy?
No, that's possible. I mean, we could make the case so the precinct structure plan is a tricky one because it's had to be carefully designed to suit two local government areas, and the way that it is structured is that there is a Town of Vic Park section and a City of South Perth section, and so I will take the question on notice just to see if provisions can be strengthened, and I'm in public open space areas for the Town of Victoria Park side to retain mature trees.
Thank you. That would be really good if we could take that on notice. That would be very helpful. Are there any other questions about this item? No, looks like there are not. All right, thank you. So the next one on the list was item 13.3, which is the Low Cost Urban Road Safety Program grant, and that one was requested to be a part of the list. For my own questions, and so I did pose a question fairly late this afternoon to the administration, which I think the answer came in quite late in the piece, but I'll just pop it on the record anyway. Given that I understand that this matter has come up at relatively short notice, I am wondering whether the town can contemplate the opportunity for this matter to go through to the special council meeting next week to form an item on the special council meeting's agenda to be dealt with before the adoption of the budget, so that we would be, in theory, agreeing to receive the grant funds, but that the budget would be amended prior to its presentation to council to incorporate those projects that where it's being encouraged of us to accept the grant funding in relation to, so they could appear as part of the capital works program, rather than we adopt the budget without them and 1 week later we amend the budget substantively for $1.5 million worth of essentially road works. Happy for that to be answered by either of the CFO or the Chief Operations Officer. It might be that there are different aspects to it that both of you will answer. So, Mr. Old, we'll give you priority to go first.
Thank you, Mayor. And as you alluded to, there was a heads up, so I've had some time to think about this. I would suggest we couldn't actually amend this item prior to the budget because we haven't adopted a budget to amend per se. So I think from a governance point of view, my view would have to adopt the budget proper and then adopt this item post that, even if it's literally 10 minutes later. As to the mechanics of getting into the budget document, that would be pretty challenging, to be honest, just purely for time, trying to amend the quite comprehensive document we prepare. So I would still advocate for two separate items. To be honest, my preference would probably be the week later. I know there's probably a perception around that, why it couldn't be adopted in the budget proper. But for me, adopting the budget as presented is quite. There's many other things hinging on that, and that would have to happen first, even if the item is adopted on the same night or a week later. Would be my view.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? So you're saying that putting the list of the projects or the road treatment projects that Main Roads have identified they want to do as a low-cost urban road project, where the total project cost would be $1.5 million and the money to be spent would come from a grant, that would be too difficult to put that into the capital works program as effectively a one-line item at this late stage? Is that what I understand you to be saying? Because it's clearly money in and money out for the same project, so that part of it wouldn't be changing anything in respect to the budget, except adding a line item into the cap works that said low-cost urban road safety program, and then the list of the 15 locations that Main Roads have provided for the dollar value that they're proposing be spent on the project. Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor. So my statement was made with the based on the premise that we list all our individual projects as an attachment to the budget. So as far as the mechanics of setting that up behind, as far as work orders and so on, to do that in 3 days is quite difficult. Therefore, the resolution which I assisted as in just adjusting one item, capital grants and purchase, construction and infrastructure, is not as difficult. You are correct. My response was, given the fact that the ancillary notes and so on attached to the budget, we would have to update at a later stage if we wanted to have like the individual sites or whatever else listed in the capital works sort of schedule, so staff know what is allocated for individual jobs and so on. So at one level, you're correct, it is possible. We could amend what we call the SOFA, the Statement of Financial Activity, for 1.5 up and 1.5 down. But as for the ancillary notes and so on, that would take a little bit of time to do that.
All right. Thank you. My next question, I think, flows on somewhat from that. So in the capital works project list for the town, we have Rutland Avenue traffic calming at $300,000, which, as I understand it, is where we have refined now the Rutland Avenue traffic calming ahead of the completion of the PSP to include 3 Wombat crossings. Noting that item 13.3, the low-cost urban road safety program grant, identifies 4 locations on Rutland Avenue within the area of the PSP and therefore within the area where we're looking at putting traffic calming for $300,000, that those traffic calming measures, I understand, would be included in the low-cost urban road fund safety program. So doesn't that mean we would need to take the $300,000 either out of the capital works program, or we have to indicate that it's fully funded by this low-cost urban road safety program grant? Because otherwise you'll end up having us rating ratepayers for $300,000 worth of municipal funds for the traffic calming treatments, and yet a week later we'll actually be getting $1.5 million worth of funding that covers that $300,000 cost. So can you please outline for us how that should be, or how you would be proposing that ought to be treated? Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor. The details of what is made up in the program, I'll have to defer to my colleagues if that's the nature of the question. Again, I did have some notice of this question, so I've had time to think about it. My recommendation would be drawing on paragraph 2 in the item 13.3, where it says the program only funds road treatments themselves. Ancillary work such as drainage and lighting are generally excluded. My recommendation would be the $300,000, we would further amend the budget to allocate that for some of those ancillary works to assist with the different sites that have been tabled for possible consideration. That would be my first recommendation. If that was not favourable, then I would suggest we allocate that to appropriate reserve, either perhaps drainage or road reserve. But my first recommendation would be we could further amend the budget to allow for those ancillary works.
All right, well, perhaps we'll go to the Chief Operations Officer, because I'm not sure I understand them to be ancillary works to effectively Wombat crossings. But Ms. Lebicus, the same issue clearly applies where it appears that Main Roads has identified locations on Rutland Avenue where we planned traffic calming measures, and they're proposing traffic calming measures, which they list as speed cushions, chicanes, islands, medians, mini roundabouts, zebras and wombat crossings, raised platforms, lane narrowing measures, and other potential treatments. So are we in the position where what's being proposed by way of the grant from Main Roads will cover the 3 wombat crossings we were proposing would be constructed on Rutland Avenue? Ms. Lebicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Yes, the low-cost urban road safety program is proposed to cover those costs. Yep.
All right, and so just to get clear, the amount of money that Main Roads would be proposing would cover would include the, well, we'll call it for want of a better description, the design and the construction of wombat crossings, because that's what we've been told we're looking at doing, is 3 wombat crossings in 3 locations. Is there any part of the Main Roads proposed low-cost urban road safety grant that would not cover the costs of the wombat crossings we were planning to put on Rutland Avenue for pedestrian and traffic safety?
For Rutland Ave, yes, it does cover the installation in its entirety.
All right, thank you. So the wombat crossings that are being proposed for Rutland Avenue, do they involve the relocation of utilities, lighting, drainage, et cetera, in order to create those wombat crossings?
We are still working through that level of detail, so it is unlikely in terms of lighting. It's services potentially, so we are actually out at the moment for detailed design that will let us know what that looks like.
All right, thank you. I'll go back to you, Mr. Old. So I know you offered 2 alternatives that you thought could be dealt with regards to taking the $300,000 and still including that in the budget, and then after that putting the money into reserves. But is it also not equally possible that what we simply do is reduce the municipal funding in the capital works program by $300,000, and any adjustment that might make to the rate increase is done accordingly, given that $300,000 by my calculations probably round about a little over 50, what is it, what, 0.5% of a rate increase, Mr. Old?
Mayor, that is obviously always an option. My calculation is about 0.2%, but we'll have to confer with the rates team as to exactly what that would look like. If I may, my statement about using ancillary works was the 10 or so projects generally, like some of those others may have some other extra work that I may not have knowledge that might make the project better outcome overall.
All right, thank you. In that case, I will go to the finance team since they're here. Perhaps I can have an answer, please, from either Ms McIntosh or Mr Pryor. What is 1% of the town's rates take proposed in the 26-27 budget? Because I'd understood it was around about 580,000, but we'll see.
Yes, that's correct. That's currently the rates yield is about $58 million. So the 1% would be about $500,000.
All right, thank you. So on that basis, $300,000 is more than, what did you say it was, Mr. Old? You thought it was about 0.2%? Oh, your magic calculator wasn't working. All right, so at the 580,000 as 1%, so 300,000 is roughly 0.5%, so 0.5%. All right, thank you for that. All right, I think that's all the questions that I had in relation to item 13.3. Are there any other people who've got questions about item 13.3, noting it's relatively new to our ears? No? All right, thank you. In that case, we move on to the last item on our list, which is item 14.3, adoption of the annual budget. So this is the draft budget for 26-27. And I'm just going to go forward. So we have numbers of questions. Going to go to you first, Councillor Minson.
Thank you. Yeah, so a question I sent through but like to put on the record. What is the town's currently unfunded renewals list, which are considered to be the next priority projects, referencing the question and answer from budget workshop number 5, which totalled approximately $2.6 million?
Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. So the listing I'm about to read out is in no specific order as such. As Councillor alluded to, this was a respondent question from budget number 5, and it's about $2.6 million. So it's also important to note that with the carry forwards and $8 million proposed for new capital works, we're still at about a $22 million capital works program. So Streetley Road, road renewal program, 551,000 from Goddard to Gallipoli. Langler Street, road renewal program, 574,800 from Carson Street to Albany Highway and Devonish Street to Archdeacon Street. The next one is Horden Street, again the road renewal program, 431,200 from McMaster Street to Mackey Street, Cul-de-sac to McMaster Street and Colombo Street to Oswald Street. The next one is Washington Street, again a road renewal program, 358,100. Washington Street from McMillan Street to Leonard Street, McMaster to Mackey Street and King George Street to McMaster. Then there's some other non-road focused possible projects. Harry Rossiter Reserve Play Equipment for $120,000. Excuse me. Reed Park Play Equipment for $100,000. Harold Rossiter Park Synthetic Practice Wickets, $70,000. Fletcher Park Cricket Nets for $70,000. Fletcher Park Fencing and Bollards, $56,000. Kate Street Reserve Fencing Bollards, $50,000. And a street sweeper, medium size, $242,000.
Thank you, Mr. Old. So for get you to read all those out, but that's helpful. My next question's on the carry forwards program, and the proposed budget has us our actuals for the preceding financial year are kind of total capital spend to be roughly $18.2 million. I just want to, I guess, get an understanding of that estimate of what will land on as an actual, and where it will, if it potentially does change as we kind of, go back and do the accounts for the past month or so. So, because I note in the financial statements for May, we're tracking at $17.9 million of actual spent on capital projects, but there's an additional $5.1 million of commitments in the financial statements for May. So can we expect, I guess, that 5.1 committed amount to end up being the actual for the past financial year? So that, I guess, similar to what happened last budget, that we ended up with a reevaluated budget for our actuals when we kind of accounted for what carry forwards actually ended up occurring. So yeah, I guess it's more, can I get some commentary around that? I guess where we are planning to, or what we think is the best estimate of where we'll land, and if we don't know, I guess what's the process going to be going forward? Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Mr. Old?
So just for clarification, while I try and do two things at once. So if I can ask Councillor, you're referring a combination of the financial statements May 2026 as the commitments shown there are 5.1. Have I understood that to be correct?
Yeah, so the actuals there are, I think, 17.9, and then there's commitments which are 5.1. Yeah, so would we expect, I guess, that those two together to form the final capital work spend for the past financial year, or some of those commitments, I guess, are carry forwards?
Through you, Mayor, I would have to analyse the commitments listed here in a little bit more detail to completely understand what that is. But the budget proper, the estimate, I think it was $18.1 million to complete, of completed or paid for infrastructure works, is our best estimate as of now. You are correct, it may vary by the time we do the financial accounts at the end of the year. Case in point, the renovations going on right now, we allowed for that, whether, I doubt we would have got any invoice before the end of the year, but there's all those variabilities that may well happen. I'm just trying to see what the biggest variance or the biggest total for the commitments are really quickly. I'd probably have to take that on notice and do some analysis on what that $5.1 million made up and the likelihood of what will come to fruition. But at this point in time, the budget as put up for adoption has 18.1, and that's our best estimate after contacting the various project managers, the staff, the chiefs involved, if they have a commentary on that.
All right, we'll take that on notice. Councillor Minson, you have further questions?
No, thank you.
All right. Are there any others with questions about the budget? I've got some questions about the budget, noting that some of my questions were sent through later this afternoon, and clearly understand that town staff may not have had a chance as yet to have a look at them. But we'll see how we go. So attachment 14.3.3 Capworks program. So under buildings, my question relates to the Scout Hall. $100,000 is located for this. To the best of my recollection, the local Member of Parliament committed $50,000 in the 2025 election for the upgrade of the Scout Hall's kitchen and bathrooms. And I'm wondering if there is a reason why the commitment, which I understand is now part of a Department of Sport and Rec grant funding for upgrades to community facilities across the state, isn't being recognised. So I'll start with that. Ms Lebickers.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I was unaware that there had been an election commitment and funding that flowed from that. The total cost of what we've got listed is actually based on the condition of the various elements. So it's the bathroom and the kitchen.
All right. Well, I'll endeavour to get you the details of that, but I think Mr CEO recalled that we met with the local member who was making that commitment after it had been announced. And my understanding was that it was the type of commitment that went into a large pot of money that was announced then by the Labor government as being $300 million worth of commitments across the state for sports and community recreation type facilities. Moving right along, are you in a position to say in relation to renewal of all the town's building assets, firstly, what is the total allocated for renewal of all the town building assets in each of the capital works program and the carry forwards? Ms Lebickers.
So between the carry forwards and the newly identified work, there's around $1.456 million worth of work that's been identified.
All right, so you don't currently have a split between the capital works and the carry forwards? Because my adding up suggested the bulk of it was in the carry forwards.
Yes,
it is?
Yes, and it's mainly driven by this building.
All right. My second question is, what is the total value, either based on replacement or depreciation, of all the town's current building assets? Either Mr Old or Ms Lebickers.
Mayor, we'd have to take that on notice.
Happy for you to take that on notice, that's fine.
Because it would have to be sourced from probably last year's annual report and whatever the adjustments are between then and now. I don't think we've had a revaluation, so I was wondering if it was listed in the budget, but I can't quite. We'll take that one on notice, I think.
All right, thank you. My next question related to that is, what is the optimal percentage spend on renewal of assets compared to the value of assets? If that needs to be taken on notice as well, that's fine. Ms Lebickers.
It's not necessarily a straight optimal percentage view that we need to take on this. We need to think about the criticality of the assets and the components of the assets, and that work hasn't been done as yet.
All right, thank you. Moving along to plant and machinery. Firstly, how many of the vehicles will be replaced with electric vehicles, noting there's only one EV listed and 2 hybrids? Ms Libicus?
Each vehicle is assessed at the time of replacement, where we actually have multiple criteria that allows us to make the selection, and certainly the way it's actually powered comes into that assessment.
All right, so does that mean we currently don't know how many of the vehicles will be replaced with electric vehicles, including the ones that are currently electric/hybrid won't necessarily be replaced by more electric/hybrids?
The ones that are currently, there's the class of those vehicles, the competitiveness of the vehicles, the performance of the vehicles is actually already known, so the likelihood of those being replaced in the fleet, and given our aspiration to migrate our vehicles, that will get a higher, any vehicles that are put into the pool for selection will get a higher rating. So it's likely that will get up again. It's more where that technology is developing across different classes of vehicles.
All right, so I'm just wondering how strictly we are adhering to our climate emergency plan and its goal for electrification of the fleet, given that some of the vehicles that are listed for replacement that are not identified already as an electric vehicle or a hybrid seem to be stock standard type models like Subaru Impreza or something like that that's listed. It's like, are we saying that there's no comparable EV version out there, given what appears to be the plethora of EVs that are now available on the market in just about every brand? Is that what we're saying, Ms Libicus?
No, Mayor Vernon, I don't think that's what we're saying. I think that where we have got fuel, where last time we bought petrol vehicles or diesel vehicles, we're actually looking at the whole range of potential fuel sources. So absolutely the shift and our climate emergency plan objectives goes into that evaluation of the suitability of vehicles.
All right, perhaps it might be assisted by my next question. What percentage of the town's fleet vehicles, heavy and light, are currently electric? Ms Libicus?
I'll take that on notice. Thank you, Mayor Vernon.
Thank you. My next question, what percentage of the town's fleet vehicles, heavy and light, will be electric through adoption of this budget? I think to some degree you've answered that we don't currently know what that will be. Is that right? All right, thank you. Final question in relation to that is, what percentage of the targets set in the climate emergency plan for electrification of the fleet have we reached to date, meaning not including the budget to be adopted? Ms Libicus. So if you need to take that on notice, take that on notice.
Thank you.
Yep, all right, thank you. Next question relates to attachment 14.3.4, the carry forwards works. Item 593 on that list is described as pedestrian infrastructure improvement phase 2 as something that was not completed in 2025-26. Can you please clarify or explain what is pedestrian infrastructure improvement phase 2 that wasn't completed? Oh, is that a question for Mr Doy? Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I do know about this one, and it is a poorly named, previously poorly named budget item, but that is that amount is being used for a potential improvement at the corner of Dane Street and Albany Highway to deliver pedestrian improvement as part of the works identified in the Albany Highway Precinct structure plan. It's going through phases of design and is not ready to go into a delivery phase as yet. Any other detail I'd have to take on notice, but that is what I know.
All right, thank you. The next question relates to item 616, and I guess it picks up the question in part that was proposed by a member of the public this evening during public question time. So this relates to Kent Street Sandpit Bushland Management Project. So again, from the carry forwards list, the total project cost there is listed as $540,950, with the cost being split between reserves of $241,350 and municipal funding of $299,600, meaning we rated almost $300,000 for it in the current or in the last financial year 25-26. But in the 26-27 CAP Works program, the very same described project appears at a total project cost of $672,000, with $500,000 in Commonwealth grant funding and now $172,000 in municipal funding. So my first question is, are these two different projects or the same? Ms. Libicus?
Mayor Vernon, I'll take that on notice.
All right, thank you. So perhaps you'll need to take the next two questions on notice. If they are in fact the same project, are we now saying that the cost to do the same work is $1,212,000, one rather than $540,950 or $672,000? If we'd like, we'll take that on notice. Yep. And my third question that relates to it is, if that is the case and it is $1,212,000 for the same project, what is the total component of the municipal funding value? So we'll take that on notice as well. Thank you. My next question in the carry forwards works relates to what is under the heading, of which there's a number of them, place planning. So nice question for you, Mr. Doy. All of these works appear to be what I would have called operating budget OPEX type works rather than the usual capital works carry forwards. Could we please have some details about why each of these projects has been like earmarked as a carry forward? Because there are some things in that description that even I don't really recognise. Things like a character or a heritage study, things like that. So anything you can tell us about that would be grateful. And if that's better dealt with by way of taking it on notice so it appears in the further consideration, then happy for that to be the case. Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, I will take that on notice just so we can provide proper detail, not only for the reason for the carry forward, but maybe a little bit of an explanation as to what each of those items are.
All right, thank you. Another question that I have relates to the current capital works program and the carry forwards. Doesn't disclose any works in relation to drainage at Planet Street in Carlisle. Now, in a workshop that we had earlier this year when we were talking about the capital works program, drainage at Planet Street, Carlisle appeared as a work that needed to be continued to be carried out, and it was described as drainage investigation and design work, meaning not an actual construction project, but it's gone from being something that sat around and looked like it was going to be part of the works. So this is actually number 12 Planet Street. And so I guess my question is, why was the adopted 2025-26 capital works program for 12 Planet Street said to cost $30,000, and then the draft CapEx carry forwards at our workshop actually said that we had an $80,000 allocation for that project, of which $27,000 had been spent, but there was a further $77,000 planned to be spent. And now here we see the final draft budget and there's no reference to 12 Planet Street, either for the further investigation, let alone for a construction works project. Ms. Libicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. My understanding is that there were a number of drainage projects that were funded in this financial year, and so Planet Street was listed as being an investigate. When we had our first pass look at one of the drainage projects, it actually, which I think is Canterbury Terrace, it actually became apparent that the drainage issues were actually related to some main roads infrastructure. And so what we did is consolidate the spending on the drainage asset class, and that allowed us to move forward this financial year with the work that we're currently doing in Coolbardie Park, where we're putting underground underground cells to capture the drainage water. So that will be completed in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so just to make sure I get this clear, because we obviously have some people who live on Planet Street who have been advocating this for a very long time and have a huge sense of frustration about every winter, of which we haven't really seen the worst of winter just yet. So do I understand you to say the works that are being done under Coolbardie Park, they are going to address the problem of flooding on Planet Street opposite 12 Planet Street? Is that right?
Yes, Mayor Vernon.
All right, and so the fact that that work is continuing now and will be finished in coming weeks, does that mean that's part of budget 25-26 and that's the reason why it no longer needs to go into 26-27?
Yes, Mayor Vernon.
All right. Can I just then clarify, if it was previously listed in the budget as an investigation only, not actual construction works, how is it that it comes to have then been a project that's been delivered, other than what you alluded to, which is a consolidation somehow of the drainage budget that produced different projects? Like, where do we go to look and say this is what this ultimately ended up costing us with the resolution we chose, given that the resolution that is now being delivered was not part of the budget in the first place? What was part of the budget was an investigation. Now we've ended up with a solution that's actually under construction. How do we work out what's that's cost? Has it been delivered within the budget that was originally allocated for it and or revised for it? Where do we go from there? Ms. Levikas?
Yeah, we'll take that on notice. Thanks, Mayor Vernon.
All right, thank you. My final question at this stage in relation to, I guess, the presentation of the budget, if I just take, and this is a question for the CFO, if I just take, let's just take the first page, the Statement of Comprehensive Income. There are 3 columns, and so we're seeing the proposed budget for 26-27, and next to that the 25-26 estimated actual, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. CFO, that's in there to refer to where you estimate will end up as at 30 June 2026. I see that you're nodding in agreement. And the final column is the 25-26 budget. So is the 25-26 budget column, is that actually the adopted budget for 25-26, or is that the adopted revised budget after the mid-year budget review, Mr. CFO?
Very good question, Mayor, and one that is often debated in the various finance offices when a budget does come up. So we have put the budget as adopted this time last year. So the budget variations or amendments throughout the year aren't reflected into that.
So can I please inquire why it is that we're not actually reflecting a column for the revised budget, because clearly one compares the revised budget as it finally stood with the budget that we're now being asked to adopt. Mr. CFO?
There is some accounting reason for that, or perhaps in the Act. I can't recall right now, so I'll take that on notice as to why we would use the adopted budget from last year or the various amendments, adopted plus all the various amendments and changes that may have occurred during a financial year.
All right, because I'm wanting to try and understand how we and indeed our community are supposed to look at a budget and understand why there is a request for a 5% rate increase if it's not possible to determine where the difference really lies between the budget that we have actually just been working on to 30 June, whose actual position you're estimating, but noting that the adopted budget was significantly revised at the mid-year budget review, which resulted in a change by considerable growth in the spend that is now not able to be compared because we're actually comparing an adopted budget from last year with a budget to be adopted, but noting that that adopted budget completely changed in the course of the year and it's not possible to see that in the budget that you'd like us to adopt going forward. So that's the rationale. That's what I'm trying to understand. So if that helps for the answer that you prepare, that would be useful. Thank you. Take that on notice. Are there any other questions in relation to the budget? Not at this time. All right. Well, there being no other questions, that brings us to item 15, which is committee reports, of which there are currently none. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given, of which there are again none at this time. So now come to item 17 on the agenda, which is public participation time, which I'm now going to open at 8:15 p.m. and ask, are there any questions from members of the public or anybody who wishes to make a statement in relation to any item in the agenda? No indication from the public gallery, so on that basis we'll close public participation time at 8:15 p.m. We're sure for those who braved sticking with us in the public gallery that you've probably got plenty of questions to go away with, but hopefully a bit of extra information as well. Item 18, questions from elected members without notice on any general matters. Are there any burning questions people have on general matters that they would like to pursue? No? Deputy Mayor Miles, you didn't want to ask any questions about the incident at the Carlisle train station that members of our community might be interested in hearing an update on?
No, I think from the emails that I received, there are discussions to be had before there will be any information. That was kind of my understanding. Unless, I guess, maybe we could ask the staff, is there any more information, or are we waiting on a conversation with Main Roads or whoever it is that owns the crossing?
Yep, all right, we can certainly do that. So I'll refer that to Ms. Labicus, and for the sake of those who might be listening on live streaming, it was reported widely on social media last week that there was an accident on the road outside the Carlisle train station that involved a person being taken away by ambulance, which we understand was to be a cyclist. And so clearly as a result of that, there's been a lot of commentary on social media about the safety of that roadway that goes under the viaduct. And in the past, when that was governed by boom gates, that was not controlled by the town. So Ms. Labicus, anything that you can tell us about what is being done going forward for that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Currently, we're working with representatives from from OMTED who did the delivery of the viaducts and that project. Certainly, we've got the outcomes of the road safety audit that was conducted and is always conducted prior to these assets being put into service. That indicated from what was there and through the design that it is adequate. So what we're trying to now work through is just what else we can and should do that will actually have real impacts. So we're working with the team from PTA, we're working with the team from Metronet and others to land on that.
All right, thank you. Are you actually able to answer the last part of what Deputy Mayor Miles requested about, in fact, who is responsible for the roadway section underneath the viaduct out the front of the train station? Ms. Labicus?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon, that's us.
So that became the town's local road from the moment the roadway was opened? All right, okay, thank you. And so do we have opportunities in the future to lobby for things like signalised lights, even just for pedestrian walkovers, traffic lights like they have down the road at Oak Street? Are those all things that we could lobby for in the future after these discussions? Because obviously we might not be responsible for installing them. Ms. Labicus?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. That's where we need to understand the risks that are there and the behaviours that are being witnessed, and actually understanding, what are those right levels of measure. I guess when we start to think about signalised intersections and signalised walkways, that's quite far down those interventions. So we need to work with this road safety and the pedestrian safety areas to actually help us build a case should we want to do something different.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from elected members without notice? Councillor Melrosa?
I thought of one. This was also in social media recently. Has the town been approached by the City of South Perth in relation to the notice of motion put forward by City of South Perth Councillor about the proposed amalgamation of Victoria Park and South Perth.
Mr. CEO, noting, of course, Councillor Melrosa, that the notice of motion lapsed for want of a mover, so it wasn't progressed by the City of South Perth Council. Mr. CEO, any communications from the City?
No, from an administration perspective, we weren't approached before the item, we weren't approached after the item.
Does the town have any view on that idea at all?
I think that's probably a bit of an unfair question, Councillor Melrosa. It's not something that's been discussed in my time on council, and that's now just about to be, 9 years. So I think at this stage, it's a little hard to ask the town staff if they've got a view on something that really isn't very well fleshed out at this stage. So I don't know if there's anything we can tell you. But if you'd like to, put through discussion requests and things like that, you can do that outside of this meeting. Any other questions on general items without notice? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Contemporary one. The town's probably aware that recent kind of announcement about proposed changes to the R codes around R20 zoning throughout Perth, I assume it is, or WA. That I guess that obviously impacts quite a significant portion of our town. Is the town considering preparing a submission? I think that's the next year is a kind of a window for submissions. Whether the town's considering preparing a submission, if so, would that come to council for our endorsement?
Refer that question to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Minson. Yes, we're obviously aware of the proposed changes to the R codes. We haven't had the time to understand them in detail as yet and what they mean. We do intend to make a submission, as we do generally for these things, which when we do don't traditionally come to council. They're normally made at an officer level. The submission's made at an officer level, and perhaps we can, as we understand the gravity of the changes that are being proposed, consider the best way to engage with elected members. But I actually haven't had time to review them in detail just yet.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Just to follow on from that, Mr. Doy, is it the case that it's predominantly the suburb of Lathlane that currently sits with an R20 coding within the town, and other areas are R30 and above? Because that's my understanding of our scheme. Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Lathlane, and from memory, portions of St James as well. Yep.
All right. Yes, well, I think that probably clarifies some of that. Any other questions from elected members without notice on general matters? No? All right. Item 19 on the agenda is confidential matters. There are currently none on the agenda, so there being no other business for our agenda briefing forum to consider at 8:23 p.m, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your participation tonight. Thank you to those who joined us in the gallery and those who joined us on live streaming. We are adjourned. As I say, a couple of those items on the agenda are going to be coming straight through to next Tuesday night's special council meeting, which is out of our usual cycle, and the remainder will go through to the ordinary council meeting on the 21st of July. So thank you, everyone. Good night.